Hello, and welcome to Thought of You, a podcast where I, Amelia Freebie,
Taylor Elise Morrison.
share our group chat with all of you, lovely listeners, and let you in behind the scenes on all of the things that we have texted each other recently and said, hey, I thought of you when I saw this. And let me tell you, in this episode, we have a lot of ground to cover because we took the past 2 months off and we're super excited to be back for a probably extended summer episode of our podcast. So we always kick things off with a first thought, best thought, where we share just a little taste of something that's on our mind lately. And we thought since this was our summer episode, we talk about our fave thing about summer so far. So Taylor, what has been bringing you some joy this summer?
Yeah, what is bringing me joy this summer is music, generally. Live music. I saw Beyonce, Tyler the Creator, Kendrick and SZA, some local shows. I guess those were all local shows. Some smaller indie shows. Like I saw one of my friend's husband's bands play pop punk covers of songs. Like they did a pop punk cover of a CeeLo Green song. It was
Oh my
just like
gosh.
very, very fun. Also doing more dancing, starting to learn how to play jazz piano, and something that I've been doing to keep in touch with some of my friends from college is a music league. Have you heard of Music League before, Amelia?
I have heard of it, but always failed to actually play it. So please explain it to me and the people.
Yeah, so essentially, you can set it up however you like, but it's a league where people submit different songs based on a theme, and then you vote on them. We're not the most competitive bunch, so we're not really concerned about the voting
Winner.
side of things. Yes, exactly. But we all appreciate music and we have overlapping but distinct taste. And so it's been really cool to get to introduce to different artists. So like the song or the theme that we have in this iteration of this round of our league is a pump up song, a song that you like to work out to. We've also done a song under 2 minutes, a best cover of a song, and it's just been a delightful way to stay in touch. That's pretty low stakes, but again, like get glimpses into people's worlds. And I found for me too, as I'm looking for the music, being like, oh, I forgot about this song, or this is on this album and I haven't listened to this album before. So it's also a way for me to get back in touch with my musical taste. So broadly, music is getting me through the summer, and most of my best memories from the summer have to do with music and art. But specifically doing the music league, I'm already thinking about how I might want to start some with some other friend groups.
Oh, I love that so much. I think I've only done Music League like in a group of sort of like strangers through like a newsletter I used to subscribe to, which like didn't totally land because I couldn't get that sense of people's like personal taste because I didn't know anyone. It was kind of anonymized. And then JJ and I tried to do it for a while, but that was like too small of a group. Just the two of us. We needed a little more interaction. But I love this idea of sharing songs and returning to your own music and memory archive to pull things out for your music league. And over the weekend, I just watched this episode of Black Mirror with Paul Giamatti, who's one of my favorite actors. And in it, he's trying to remember his memories of his like kind of first big love. And there's this sort of AI character that guides him into these like photographs and these memories. And when they can't flesh out the whole memory, they play songs that were like on at the party, or that like there's this whole scene with like the person he was with who was playing cello. And once they found the recording of this original song she'd written, he's able to remember her face. And it was just really beautiful. And it reminded me so much of what you just said and the ways that, I don't know, music reaches our subconscious on a whole different level than our daily experience, I think. And I really treasure that too.
I'm getting teary-eyed, just all of the connective tissue that music brings us. What about you? What's been up for you in your summer?
So for me, the two things that have brought me the most joy this summer will surprise no one. One is my pool, and the other is reading romance novels. And as of recording this, literally yesterday, I set myself the task of seeing like how many hours I could spend in the pool. Like, could I actually be in my little backyard pool for a whole day? And the answer was like almost yes. I like got in at like 10:30 in the morning, and I solidly was like in and out of the pool until like 7 p.m. I definitely had on a lot of sunscreen and was really trying to take care, but I still feel that sort of like swollenness of having just been out in the heat and the sun all day. And that like I don't know, the special like sleepiness and exhaustion that comes from just like being hot for a long time. And it felt very summery. And while I did that, I read this like stack of romance books that I had had on a shelf in my house for a really long time. I definitely dropped one of them in the pool. So I was really glad. I was like, this is a no library book situation. This is only books I own, such that when I did drop one in the pool, it was fine. But it was just so nice to be held by the water. Like, you know, my pool is very small. It's just big enough to float in. I'm not swimming by any means. So I was just floating and reading. Two of the books I read were like totally escapist Italian food romance books, which is like a trope or a theme that I love. And another was like a really lovely sort of queer romance set in Hollywood. And it was just really nice to do something purely for pleasure in a year that's just been so challenging and fraught with violence and horrible things. Just like taking a day to feel pleasure like in my body and my mind and my spirit felt really special, and I'm really grateful that I was able to do that. And it feels like it's kind of buoyed me for the rest of the summer or the weeks to come at least.
I love that you had that time for you to do some pleasure reading. And if you all have not listened to Amelia's other podcast called Pleasure Reading, it does exist. We will link to it.
Thanks for the friend promo for me. Yes, I did read one of the books that was on my most recent episode about queer romance. So yeah, just nice to have space for that and to remember what brings us that joy and that connectivity, right? I think that's really special during hard times like these are. So speaking of hard times, let me make a hard pivot into our first topic of the day. So when we initially thought of doing like a Midsummer's episode, originally we kind of pitched it to each other as like, we're going to talk about summer music and movies and media and just sort of have this sort of high level, like these are the things we're, you know, reading, watching, listening to this summer. And that is not exactly what's going to happen today. So this is our Midsummer's Thought of You. It's actually coming out on like the middle between the summer solstice and the fall equinox. So like right in the middle of summer. But we're not just going to talk about summer media. We're actually going to take on some of these challenging topics and themes and the things that are coming up in our world this year. So for our first topic, we're going to talk about racism and eugenics and this gene campaign that some of you may have seen that is bringing up this sort of conversation into the forefront, at least online, that I'm seeing. So Taylor, you were the one who sent me a bunch of links about this. You were the one who was like, saw this, thought of you, we should talk about it. And so I want to pass it to you to kind of take us into this topic, which in our notes is just called Genes and Eugenics. So would you like to begin?
Yeah, and in order to begin, I feel like I have to out myself a little. I don't know if I've talked about this on the show, but I have a morbid fascination with the right wing, extreme right. It started for me probably in middle school. I remember we had to watch this like 60-minute special or something about these basically like Aryan Nation twins who are raised by a white supremacist parent. And it just showed me that the KKK still exists, that Nazis still exist. And I remember truly like searching, being on the KKK website, like doing what I could at that age, like early teens, of understanding, okay, these people still exist. I need to know what their symbols are, what their language is, what their arguments are, so that I can protect and prepare myself. So all of that to say, it is decades later, and I still have that spidey sense and awareness. So what was I doing on a Sunday morning? I was reading this article, we're going to link to it, from Sky News, which was following this whites only community that is being built in Arkansas. Also, my grad school is based in Arkansas, so I only go there once a year generally, but Arkansas is more on my radar than it might have been even a year ago. And when I say a whites only community, there are plenty of communities. You go to a suburb that are essentially whites only, but this is whites only in a white supremacist way of we want to protect our genes, our heritage, our lineage, and have our children raised in a community where it's only people like us who have the same beliefs as us. So all of the beliefs that you're thinking, it's like they don't believe in racial mixing, so interracial marriages. They don't appreciate anyone who's not white. They don't appreciate Jewish folks. They don't appreciate gay folks. Just everything that you would think of from the extreme right is there. If you really want to, I actually think the piece is beautifully done. Like it does a great job of interspersing these interviews that are video with the text. So I won't say it's easy to get through from a content perspective, but it's easy to get through from a structure perspective. So I'm reading about that and being like, yep, neo-Nazis are at it again. And what's interesting there too is the language that they try and use. Well, other people have communities that are just for them. Why would it be bad? They can have their community over there. We're just having our community. We don't hate anyone else. We just want our own space. So that's the context that I was reading. The other thing that came out earlier this week, and honestly, I have not seen as many people talking about this. Actually, that's not true. I would say as many people who are not also morbidly fascinated with the far right as me talking about this tweet from Homeland Security. So obviously Homeland Security is doing terrible things. We are all watching in horror with the way that immigrants and citizens are being treated by essentially this like reincarnation of like Nazi secret forces, essentially. And Homeland Security posted this tweet that says, a heritage to be proud of, a homeland worth defending. And the photo there is American Progress, which is by John Gast. Couple things already. If you look at the American Progress, it's this idea of manifest destiny. You see the white settlers coming in, the Native Americans are leaving. The photo is essentially cut in half. So one side where the Native Americans are and are being driven out is darkness. And then with the white people comes this progress and this literal light in the photo. So you notice that, and that's already like, seems kind of like we're defending Native American genocide here. Beyond that, though, if you look at the two letters that are capitalized, it is heritage and homeland. I guess there's defending as well, but heritage and homeland, which, okay, that's interesting. I can think of another white supremacist phrase that would have two capital H's. Something to support that is also when you count the number of words in this tweet, it's 14. 1488 is a white supremacist way of basically talking about, so H is the eighth letter of the alphabet, and then there's 14 words in this white supremacist phrase. It's essentially a way of saying like Hail Hitler. You can say that I'm like being in my QAnon flow with this or not, but I think it's important to acknowledge that what is happening in the government, regardless of if you just look at this photo and say, oh, that's interesting that Homeland Security is saying we are defending our homeland with white people, full stop, that's bad. But then when you have this other layer that only certain people are noticing, it's really scary. So I could talk about this forever because I know far too much about this for my own mental health. But that is the context that I was sitting in as I really engaged with what we're going to be talking about in the moment with the genes. So lucky Amelia, I sent her this article as she was supposed to be lounging in the pool.
Well, I always welcome you into our group chat. And I think personally, it's on me to have a phone boundary if I want one. And yesterday I did. I left my phone inside, so I hadn't seen it until I was ready to, engage with the internet again. But when I did go through all of this, I felt like, so many different things. I think that the settlement in Arkansas is abhorrent. And I am really disgusted by the rhetoric that they're using because they call it return to the land, which to me is such coded language and does make me fearful in the sense of there's a lot of language that I see the right using that I think has sort of been pulled out of more progressive spaces and then made to mean the opposite of what these movements intended, right? So we have a sort of reclamation of the land or a sort of reclamation of indigenous culture and indigenous relationships to the land. And I'm used to language like return to the land in that context. But to see it here in this like completely different and colonial and supremacist and racist way, I find really alarming. And also the way that in this piece, some of the people interviewed, particularly an interview with 3 white women there, they talk about this as a loving movement. And they talk about how they don't, as you said, they don't hate anyone. They just want to like love each other and love people who have this shared ancestry. And so we see this real perversion of concepts and movements and belief systems that I do believe in and stand behind, not the white supremacist version, but as they've like been uplifted by indigenous people, by Black American communities, and now they're being taken up in this totally twisted and fucked up way. And I think what that piece did really well is like lay that out for me to see very clearly.
Yes. So that is the background for then us looking at this Sydney Sweeney campaign. If you haven't seen it, congratulations. You have been successfully living your best summer life. And I will say that I ignored the ad. I saw it come up in a social feed. I saw just like a post of Sydney's cleavage and was like, I'm not really interested. I mean, I am bisexual, but I'm not interested in that. And so I just scrolled past it. It wasn't until I saw even more rhetoric around it that I realized, oh, there's something here that I need to engage with or I'm choosing to engage with. So before we actually talk about the ad, what was your introduction to this whole Sydney Sweeney discourse?
Yeah, so I had also not seen the ad, or like I hadn't even scrolled past it in a social feed as someone who doesn't have social media, but I had seen the news reporting that American Eagle had done this campaign with Sydney Sweeney, and it had resulted in a pretty immediate bump to their stock price. I think like the day it came out, there was like a 4% bump, and they reported even more the day after that. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, they're probably just doing this pretty typical, like, male gaze, female objectification, Sydney Sweeney is sexy in blue jeans sort of thing. And then when you sent me the other pieces around this, I started to look deeper. So for folks who have not seen these ads, I'm just going to read you the text of them, or describe them to you, I suppose. So we have Sydney Sweeney in these ads with various, like, close-up angles of her face and body. And in one of the ads, she says this: genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, even eye color. My genes are blue. And then there's this sort of like seemingly male voiceover that says, Sydney Sweeney has great genes. And then there's another one where she says, my body's composition is determined by my genes. And as she says this, we see the camera pan from her face down to her chest and her breasts. And then she says, hey, eyes up here. And then the voice comes in again and says, Sydney Sweeney has great genes. So we do see the objectification and the catering to the male gaze that I expected in the ads. But there's also a lot more here when you start to unpack the subtext of what she's saying. So, Taylor, what did you find or see that sort of clued you into that subtext and how problematic it is?
I mean, again, after watching this Return to the Land, where these people are talking about their genes and their ancestry, and then seeing the tweet from Homeland Security about like a heritage to be proud of, and it's this blonde haired, blue eyed woman, I'm immediately thinking like fascism, Nazi, Aryan ideals, like that's where my mind is going. I think I probably would have gotten there even without what I had been reading moments before, but this that context just really keyed me into it. Um and I think I will add to, I went over to TikTok to just see some of the comments and see what people were saying on TikTok and on Instagram for American Eagle. And I'll say a lot of people that I saw, a lot of seemingly white women in particular, like what they first keyed into was the male gaze, and they were upset about that. Like, I'm supposed to want to wear these jeans. If you actually look at the ads, like they don't fit her particularly well in many of the ads. Like it's not doing a good job of actually selling the jeans.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this white feminist response to, this is the male gaze. We are tired of the male gaze. And then you saw people looking a level deeper of, okay, but why are we talking about genetics? Why are we talking about specifically calling out hair color and eye color? This seems suspicious. So what jumped up for you as you were looking at it initially?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think that these ads are, in a certain sense, like a very effective example of dog whistling, right? Or a dog whistle. So they are saying something that may seem neutral to some people, that genes are passed down from parents to offspring. But for other people who perhaps have a white supremacist ideological framework or who understand the history of eugenics globally and in the US, they start to hear that this rhetoric has been commonly used by Nazis, by eugenicists, to say that there are certain biological genes that are more favorable than others, and they perhaps have a certain eye color and a certain hair color, and not even just perhaps, right? We can be explicit. Like basically we see Nazi eugenicists saying like, you should be white, you should be blonde, you should be blue-eyed, you should have these Aryan traits. And so if you're familiar with that history, and if it's top of mind for you, when you hear this, you're going to be like, what the fuck? And if it's not top of mind for you, it may just totally pass you by without you thinking twice about this being anything other than an ad for blue jeans. And I think that we're seeing this more and more, like these very effective dog whistles culturally. And by effective, I mean like American Eagle is speaking perhaps exactly to who they intended to. And they're making a pretty like implicit but clear statement about who their brand is for and who it's not for. Like obviously, like, you know, I see the world through my perspective, like as a white woman. And so, yeah, what flagged for me initially is the sort of like sexual objectification. And then what I appreciate about you bringing this to me and like just general critical analysis media is it's a reminder like, hey, there's actually another layer of this that you should look at and think through. And it goes for me from being like, this is a ad for jeans that I don't care about, to me being more like, this is super fucked up and problematic.
Yeah, what it was making me think of, I don't know if you remember the old Super Bowl ads that would be like with Danica Patrick, that were always like very sexual and objectifying her. Initially, I was ready to write it off as that. But then now we're in 2025 and we have people in office, several people in office who explicitly believe these fascist eugenicist things, that we're seeing it ratcheted up a different level. And one of the pieces of analysis that I sent to you was from this creator who is on TikTok as Salt LaCroix. Her name is Gabrielle. She has, to our knowledge, we think that she made this up. Let us know if there's someone else who is the true originator of this. But she talks about Operation Beige, and beige means boring and engineered to identify with gentrification and eugenics. And she talks about how this campaign is really a great example of the beige agenda.
Yeah, I thought her analysis was fantastic and just so clear in the ways that both the rhetoric and the dog whistle of the ad are like really screaming eugenics at us. And I also like something I really like about this acronym is that it's not just about the rhetoric, but also about like the aesthetics of it, right? Like boring is the first word in it. And I think that there is this sort of relationship I'm starting to see between the sort of like boringness and the neutrality that these things are claiming and their beigeness, right? It's like if you can sort of say like this is neutral, why are you upset about it? Which is being said right now online. Like I'm seeing the headline when I was doing more research around this, there the headlines that like liberals are freaking out over American Eagle ad that totally says nothing. Like that's all happening. And it's terrifying to watch the ways that just like the force of MAGA politics and fascism is sort of enforcing this like neutralization and normalization and beigeness of whiteness over and over and over again.
And some of the examples that she brings in are clean girl aesthetic. Yeah, these senses of purity, of quote simplicity, like you said, neutrality, but who is allowed to who is the standard for that? Who is allowed to, and like who benefits too? I went through a phase when I was getting really into reading about interior design and how some of these simpler, more minimalist ways of doing interior design are in contrast to more ethnic ways that have a lot of color and texture and intricacy into the work. And so these pieces that can seem really neutral, like being beige, being minimalist, are actually taking away certain cultural markers and touchstones. And again, kind of silently hinting, this is who the standard is. We are acting in opposition to, this is a pendulum swing against this other way of being that tends to be non-white, that tends to have these ethnicities that we don't want to be associated with.
Something that stands out to me there too is like you really see this sort of mirror the rise of fascism like aesthetically. Like all of this neutrality is really like a language and a politic of submission, and the way that like we should all just submit to an all-powerful leader dictator state in a fascist state, right? And I just think that, but I'm also, what's coming up for me now is even thinking about the way that like quiet luxury perhaps paved this path. Like I want to both call out the horrific nature of our current government and also see the way that like this road has been paved before Trump was president, or was paved during his first presidency, but it didn't like get destroyed by the Biden presidency, right? Like a lot of the cultural trends, the aesthetic trends, and just like the lawmaking and policy making that happened during that time, we're now just seeing the results of that. And it really makes me want to like revolt and wear colors all the time, which is like such an oversimplified response to this. But also I think it's like, it's really bringing up a lot for me about the relationships between aesthetics and politics, because we really see this ad and this presidency doing their politics on an aesthetic level. And like, what does that mean? And how do we fight back both on the aesthetic level and the political level and refuse these fascist implications and events?
I don't think that's too simplistic. It's something that I've been working on myself for a long time. I didn't want to wear a lot of color. I didn't want to put a ton of color in my home. And I find that the more I come into my own, the more I am incorporating those things. I went through a phase last year where I was doing the 3 words method. And my 3 words are timeless, feminine, bold. And it felt really important to have the bold in there because I do have some things that could be some things that I wear that could seem more preppy, that could have some of that East Coast aesthetic that would be considered Operation Beige. But I'm really trying to make sure that I have this brightness, this boldness, these textiles, these ways of wearing and showing up in rooms where I'm taking up space, not just blending into the background. So it is a balance. And we're going to talk more later about someone else and how they use clothes as a form of expression. But I think it's valid, and I think it's really valuable for us as we lean into our sense of style to know that it is political
Mhm.
in so many ways. We probably should have another episode. I mean, we've talked about clothes and how they're made and how that is political, but I think the wearing of clothes is political as well.
And this speaks to, and you sort of brought into our chat, other jeans ads that have embraced blue jeans, have even made puns about genetics before, but we're not pushing this eugenicist rhetoric. So, do you want to share some of those examples that you brought for us?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I could hear the people who are saying these snowflake liberals, like they're just talking about wearing jeans. And so I was thinking, okay, what makes this different than some of the campaigns that I've seen, even relatively recently? So the one that was top of mind for me is Beyonce. Obviously, she has a song called Levi's Jeans. She did a series of ads in Levi's Jeans. I will say, like, is there an element of the male gaze in those ads? Absolutely. But it is within those ads, like there is a sense of ownership that I see
Mhm.
with Beyonce in her kind of claiming the space that she wants to take in the ads. It's also, even though it is this like one, she's in a diner in this maybe Americana setting, another, she's in a laundromat, it is saying that she and people who look like her have a place in this classic outfit of
Mhm.
a tank top and jeans. So again, we're saying this thing that people have been wearing in America for a long time. Yeah, cool, wear that, but it's inclusive rather than be. I'm even thinking, like, would I be upset if they said Beyonce has great jeans? I think there might be a whole colorism conversation I would have there, but there's things to think about there. But I liked that campaign overall. I thought it was fun. I thought, oh yeah, I might want to get a pair of shorts like that. Versus the Sydney Sweeney was like, oh, do I need to move to another country? Was my reaction to it. Truly. Um, what did you think of the Levi's jeans ads?
I just really loved the world building in them, which also is like really an interesting comparison with the Sydney Sweeney ad, which appears to happen like nowhere. I mean, it happens like on a probably a green screen, the way it's filmed. But in the Beyonce Levi's ads, there are three ads, and they each have like one's in a laundromat, one's in a bar, one's in a diner. They're so clearly articulated. And they also are a little fantastical. Like in one of them, like in the diner, the timer goes off and she like pulls her shirt out of the freezer and puts it on and walks out. Like I just think there's some fun elements there that really emphasize, as you said, like they emphasize place and they emphasize like reclamation. And that feels so aligned with everything that the Cowboy Carter album especially was about, right? And so I really think that that is another piece of all of this and this rhetoric particularly, and this is actually going to come up again at the with another one of our topics, this sort of like desire to return to the past, but just the sort of like return to the land, that when white people say that, especially white folks in the US, especially colonizers, it is suspicious inherently. And I think that that's actually a point that Imani Perry makes in her book, Black and Blues, which you also sent me and which I was reading the introduction of today. And in one of the early chapters, she talks about reading this account of a white woman and her husband from Iowa who moved to Liberia. And she's like, Imani Perry's reflecting on, I'm reading this and I'm like, who is she to tell this story? But also, I can't stop reading. And how do we make sense of like, it really matters whose mouth these words come out of. It really matters who's writing this story down. And part of our role as critical consumers of media is to really question that. And so that for me wraps into this conversation around like both the Beyonce Levi's ad and the Sydney Sweeney ad and this like disgusting return to the land community. It's like, who is saying what? Whose body are these clothes on? How are they being portrayed? What world are they being portrayed in? Like, it matters so much. And I think a lot of what eugenics is trying to do is just like flatten and whiten the world so there's no context. And that's also like what fascism does. in many ways. And so this is all extremely interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the Black and Blues book by Imani Perry. I've not read it yet. I've added it to my TBR. For anyone who's wondering about it, it's this collection, this book that came out where she's looking at the color blue as it relates to the Black American story. So both blue as in the blues music, which I told you earlier, I'm learning jazz piano, so that already topic is exciting to me, but also blue as in the color blue and what that meant in Africa as the clothes were being dyed and what that meant in America to enslaved women who like wanted to wear the color blue, and that was a stance that they took. So anyone who's interested in some historical context from a Black perspective of, again, a different direction this campaign could have gone, other ways to think about blue and the color blue. The last one that I wanted to share was from this creator, Skylar Marche. She did an ad with Gap, and she used really similar words about like having good jeans, but the vibe is so different. Now, she is a Black woman. She has this groovy music in the background. And when she's talking about genes and genetics, she chooses to be really clear that she's using the word genes. So she actually has JEAN and then dash etics. She also has a line in there, something about like, from emotional distress and something else comes XYZ. And there's a playfulness about it. And again, a level of access. Everyone can have good genetics. You figure out what story you want to tell through what you wear versus the exclusivity of the Sydney Sweeney ad. What popped up for you when you watched the Skylar Marche version of Good Genes ad?
It felt very playful, as you use that phrase. And also, it felt like it was presenting jeans as a part of fashion and style that came from like the cultivation of agency. That like style is something you can cultivate, your genetics is something you can choose. And I think that that is so different than what we get with the Sydney Sweeney ad, where it's like you're born with this and you are this way. And we only want a certain kind of people who are a certain way. Like those are just such different, very, very like determinist instead of autonomous way of thinking about fashion and bodies and everything else. I mean, and a whole worldview, as we've been talking about. And so when I saw this, like, this actually made me want to like buy a pair of jeans as opposed to the Sydney Sweeney ad, which when I watched it on mute and didn't know what it was, I was like, ew. And then when I read the words, I was like, ugh. So of course, I think that that's also something that's coming up for me. That's a piece of this is like how much media I see muted. And if it doesn't have captions, I don't even know. Because I'm realizing as we talk about this, when I first saw like the screenshots and the sort of like when I opened the ad that was, or when I opened the article about, American Eagle stock has gone up this much, like I think I probably saw an embedded Instagram post, but I didn't click on turn the sound on. So I didn't even know what it said. I just saw the visual of it. And I think that even just on the visual level, this Gap content creator ad was so much more playful and fun. And then when we get to the language and how it's used, it was so much more intentional, so much more full of agency and freedom and delight. And like, that's what I want from aesthetics, not control and power over and determinism. Like, no thanks to that. So I guess like the moral of this story, question mark, is like not American Eagle, but yes, maybe Gap and Levi's. Like we want to buy more of those and wear more of those, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's whatever feels good in your body, ideally bought secondhand. That's the moral of the story. I love a good pair of jeans. I love, love, love a good pair of jeans. So it did get me excited for fall weather with jeans, but also I've thrifted some really cute shorts this summer. So I've been having a shorts moment. I'm thinking about what I want to wear for Lollapalooza, which will actually, that might be a dress moment. We'll see. But lots of things to unpack here. This was heavier than what we expected to open the show with. If you're still with us, thank you. We have some lighter hearted things ish to get to. This next one is definitely more lighter hearted. Um,
Yes.
we're going to talk about Tracy Ellis Ross and her new show on Roku, Solo Traveling. I had seen it all over social media because she's really ramped up as she's talking about the show. She wants it to do well, obviously. I actually hadn't seen a ton of her on social media before she started ramping this up, and she's just a delight in my feed. I love her sense of style. We were talking about agency. Like, to me, she is a woman who knows who she is and what she wants. But this also came up on your radar as someone who's not on social media. So, how did you come to know that this was happening?
Yeah, I think I got an ad for it on my Roku TV. So it's interesting. Like, I mean, this is a whole separate conversation, but like, as someone who doesn't buy things from Amazon, my television options are kind of like Roku TVs or like Samsung TVs. I really don't like the Samsung interface. My parents have one of those. So, like, I buy Roku TVs now, I guess. Although there's a whole lot of other surveillance and ad problems with Roku TVs, but I think that it popped up as like an ad when I turned my TV on and I was going to a different app to stream something over the weekend. It popped up and I saw Tracy Ellis Ross and I was like, okay, what is this? I'm so interested and intrigued, and then went and opened it and saved it and watched the first episode. And I have to say, it's such a delightful show. So for anyone who has not heard of this or seen this, like, I do support you like pausing this right here right now and just going to watch it. Like, it's so, the basic premise is that Tracy Ellis Ross is going to travel solo to these different countries. And in the first episode, she goes to Morocco. And we start, one thing I really liked is we don't start from like the moment she lands there, like many travel shows do. We actually start from the moment when she's like trying to pack for the trip and talking about the anxiety she has as a solo traveler. Taylor, what stood out to you from that part of the episode?
Yeah. Ugh. The first of all is like I need to up my packing game. I will say that I'm a Virgo rising, daughter of a Virgo mother, and my mom loves to pack, is always like telling me little tips and tricks. So I've gotten better at packing, but I'm always comparing my level of packing to my mom, which I'm just never going to be at that level. So I related to the sense of, ooh, I want to have options. Mm-hmm. Normally when I'm traveling, I want to have things like she mentions, what if I meet a cute man? What if this thing happens? And my brain can definitely go into so many what ifs. And for her, we see and we know as people who have observed her, clothes are so important to her. So it's not just like the practicality, but also, will I be able to express myself the way that I want to in these different situations that pop up? So that felt relatable to me because I have definitely had the moments. I mean, I've had moments when I've been like, oh shoot, I think I'm going to buy something because now I know that this is happening and I didn't adequately prepare for it. So very relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to JJ over the weekend about some trips that I have coming up, and like, both of them will be solo trips for me. And I was thinking about like, what are sort of these friction points and what comes up around packing and how can I help myself like enjoy the trip more because I'm a little more prepared. I've like anticipated some of my own needs, because especially if you're traveling internationally, like you can't necessarily just go grab something that you may be able to go grab when you're at home, perhaps, whether that be clothes or, you know, meds or whatever it may be that you need. And I wasn't really thinking on the level of fashion. I was thinking on the level of like chargers and convenience items. But then when I watched the show, I was like, oh, what are the like clothing items that help me feel like confident and comfortable as I move through the world, no matter where I am? And it sort of brainstormed for me. Like, I definitely want to like buy some new shoes. Like, I don't have any good traveling walking shoes. I have like my pair of stained Hokas that I take everywhere, but I don't feel as like cute or confident when I wear them. So I was just thinking about and felt inspired by her way of approaching her wardrobe and thinking through what she's going to take on the trip. And then she like gets to Morocco, and you know, overall, I don't want to like give any spoilers. I want people to watch the show, but overall, what really stood out to me, my take on it is that it's very like Anthony Bourdain meets Sex and the City meets Girlfriends, of course. And so we sort of see really this both like deep curiosity about the places she's going to and like extreme playfulness and in like the way that she like clothes herself to move through the worlds that she visits and travels to. And I think the other thing that's fun about the show is it has this like clear relatability, right? Like we get her packing stress, her travel anxiety. There's a moment in the first episode where like passport control finds her vibrator and she's like dying. Like all of that is extremely relatable and I love it. And then we also get the like gorgeous escapism of like she's flying first class in like a sleeping pod with her super fancy pajama set on. She has a private driver when she gets there, you know, like I'm not ever going to be able to go to Morocco in that way, but I like that it's both like I get to watch her do it and enjoy that experience with her like I mean, she just has such charisma and charm. And she's also very candid. Like from the very beginning of her getting to Morocco, she asks her driver, like, do people in Morocco consider themselves black? Like, what does that mean here? How do you think about that? And I was like, thought that was such a powerful question to open with. And I can't wait to see what other conversations she has throughout the series.
That's an added layer that I really appreciated. I did go to Morocco when I was studying abroad in Spain. And I remember like having this assumption of, oh yeah, I'm going to Africa. So like these people are going to consider themselves to be black. And then I got there and I'm like, don't actually think that's the case. Only when it was convenient. People would be like, hey sister, when they wanted me to like be in the market and buy goods from them. So yeah, I appreciated that layer. There's a moment where she's like taking down her braids and those are the types of things that are like so normal, things that I have done, things that I have seen people that I love do, helped people do, that does not often get depicted on TV. So I just really appreciated seeing some of those elements of my experience reflected in this woman. There was something else. Oh yeah, I think the other thing that I appreciate is this conversation that she has multiple times about her experience versus the way that she's perceived. And there's a really popular talk that she gave when she got Glamour Woman of the Year. And she mentions it in the show too about being responsible for her own happiness. And yeah, just really trying to meet this version of herself that can have the fullest expression. And she talks about like the grief of I'm 52 and I know I'm not going to be a mom now. And the grief of sometimes it would be nice to travel with someone else. And she says, I quoted it, I don't want to be the poster child for singledom. She talks about actually what I want to be the poster child for is like full expression of yourself, which can happen whether you're inside a relationship or outside of a relationship. And so what I'm liking about the show are some of these moments that very obviously look like they're shot on her iPhone, where you see the glamour of, I have a driver who's taking me to this private glamping situation, and that I'm in bed, and am I lonely right now, or am I sad? And what's the difference between those feelings? It just, again, there's a sense of relatability of, yeah, this is probably a $10,000, $20,000 plus vacation. I will not have one of those, but I will have those feelings of when I solo travel. This was great, but how would this have been different if I was with someone else? And should I be with someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. I always forget that a lot of people have never taken a trip by themselves. Like solo travel as a phenomenon is so comfortable to me at this point. I mean, I have been on so many trips alone. I took overnight bus trips when I was like 19 or 20. I drove cross country by myself when I was 22. Like I just have a sort of independent spirit. I mean, I'm an Aries sun, so of course I just like do whatever I want. But I think like what I appreciate about and I had forgotten that like when I did those things, a lot of people told me it was scary or expected me to be afraid or intimidated, or they were afraid and intimidated for me. And watching the show, I was reminded of a lot of that, like, especially when I did my cross country road trip, a lot of people projected a lot of their fear around that kind of travel onto me. I mean, I was like camping, I was like sleeping in the back of a pickup truck. It wasn't like a glamorous trip, and I was in the outdoors, but I only ever felt afraid maybe twice. And I can very clearly think of those experiences and what happened. But I think that what I liked about watching the show was that she both like uplifted solo travel as like a very normal and fun and great experience. And she spoke to those other pieces, like you were highlighting, Taylor, around like, and also sometimes at the end of the day, you're like, oh, it would be nice if I could like joke about that weird thing I saw with somebody. Or like, it would be nice if when I was standing in front of this painting, somebody else was there to be in awe of it with me. And then also, it's like, oh, thank God no one is here while I want to like lay in the pool for 12 hours. Like, there's both. I mean, it's just true of life, right? Like, there's the freedom of being independent people and then the joy of our interdependence. And I think that this show like really takes us into that in such a cool and interesting way. It has such a unique flavor. Like I know I gave these other touchstones for it, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like there's kind of nothing else like this that I've seen, especially in the travel TV space.
I completely agree. I'm excited. I mean, I was watching it to prepare for this, and Matt was like, wait, is this a whole show? I want to watch this with you. So yeah, there is, it's not quite like anything else. I think it feels extra special for me as a Black woman. And Matt, as he was watching it with me, was like, is Tracy Ellis Ross just you in a trench coat? Like there's a lot of similarities to me when I'm in my fullest expression. I love solo travel. I end up doing a lot of solo travel for work, but then I'll try and tack on these experiences on my own before or after. I've always been a very independent person too. I forget what I was saying the other day. I was doing something. I was like, well, I'm not really worried about it. And my mom was like, yeah, I know you're not worried about it. As in like, I just, I tend not to be super worried about things. I know that I'll figure it out. But yeah, seeing her dancing and being silly and singing to herself, just enjoying her own company. And as an introvert, I really like that. I don't know that Tracy Ellis Ross would say that she's an introvert necessarily. I don't know where she falls on that spectrum, but being able to acknowledge, yeah, I like it is okay to enjoy your own company. This I was actually not planning on bringing into the conversation, but there's this Instagram series slash TikTok series called Subway Takes. Have you ever seen?
Is this the guy who has like the subway, the metro card,
Yeah.
and they like he like uses it like a microphone? Okay, yes, I have
Yeah.
seen these clips on YouTube.
Yeah. So there was one recently where this woman was just talking about how introverts don't pull their weight, essentially. I don't think she
That's a
understands
take.
what an introvert is, truly. Because the way
Yeah.
that she's talking about, she's like, it takes so much effort. Like, it takes effort for me to do this and this and this. And it's like, okay, then actually you're an introvert too. Like, it's not
Yeah.
that introverts are not social. It's just that we know that we need to have our energy restored from that. Whereas other people, extroverts, are getting their energy charged from that. So, all of that to say, I think as an introvert, as a Black woman, watching this and seeing someone so at home in their own company and that being a good thing and getting into the nuance of, yeah, it can be hard at times, but also how lovely is it that I can sit here in this little secret garden and read my book. Also, yeah, just I'm so tired of people not knowing what an introvert actually is. I'm just tired of people, but that's a story for another day.
Spoken like a true introvert, lol. Not really.
Yeah.
Well, I love how like much clearer like mirroring and reflecting back you're feeling from this show as a Black woman. And I am happy to celebrate that with you and enjoy the show myself as well. It's really beautifully done. And I can't wait to finish the season. And I believe it is totally free to watch. So yeah, you can just watch it for free. And find us on Substack. Tell us what you think of the show. What's your favorite episode? We would love to know. So, not that I want to leave Tracy Ellis Ross behind, but we do have one more topic for today's episode. Something you and I have both been clocking that's happening this summer is I feel like we're seeing a bit of a reboot of the Girlboss. And I noticed this because Ty Haney is back at Outdoor Voices, and they did like a big splashy kind of quiet but splashy PR campaign around her return to the brand. And then Audrey Gelman, of formerly of The Wing, is doing press again about some of her new ventures. And so those are sort of things I've been noticing. Taylor, have you been noticing the girl boss sort of seem to like creep back onto the scene this year?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it ever truly left.
Oh,
Like,
the truth. That's fair.
I think some people left Girlboss. I think that the Girlboss has always been around, though. I'm also thinking, too, of um, Jacqueline Simpson of Create Cultivate. She sold it and then bought it back. When I think
Mm-hmm.
of girl bossy brands, Create Cultivate not only has that girl boss aesthetic, but also like has these conferences that I see as very girl bossy of yeah, you can do it. Millennial women empowerment, all of that. So literally one
Yeah.
of the biggest brands of Girl Boss has been back in the last year or two.
Yeah, they have a 7-figure founder retreat happening this September and a lot of gradients on their website. So definitely the vibe. So we've talked, I think, about the girl boss before. At least personally, we talked about girl boss culture and girl bosses a lot in our group chat over time. And, I was really thinking about this in relationship to the conversation we were having in the first part of this episode around like, is the girl boss sort of like a dog whistle for anything else? Or what is the value system inherent in this that like sort of returns when the girl boss reemerges? Like, I am very intrigued to see if these women who like sold and then bought back or were sort of like removed as CEO and then became CEO again. We saw this at Bumble as well this year. Like, are they any different on the other side of like returning? Like, is it a different value system they're bringing back to their work? Is there a different aesthetic? I mean, so far, I haven't seen any evidence of that. Have you?
No, I really see, at least, especially this iteration brand of Girl Boss. We have to bring into the conversation Sophia Amoruso, who coined the
Mm-hmm.
term Girl Boss, had Nasty Gal, now does a few different things, including being a VC. She has her own venture capital firm. But for Whitney Wolf Herd, for Audrey Gelman, for Ty Haney, they all raised venture capital. So I think that
Mm-hmm.
is a very particular brand of girl boss that is aligned with these venture capital principles of endless growth and constantly needing to scale that cannot fundamentally change. Like the
Mm-hmm.
the business model, the structure of it is that we have to grow so that we can 10x the investment, and they can put whatever words they want to put on it, but at the end of the day, like that's the way the numbers need to work out in order for things to be a success. Um and I don't think they're trying to say anything different, honestly. Like when
Yeah.
I read those two articles, I was like, yeah, y'all are doing the same thing. You're doing what is expected. Like the other thing about VC is people love to invest in like second, third, etc. time founders because you have gone through the process before. You understand the ins and outs of working with investors and working at venture scale. So I guess if I want to be like generous, I could say it's cool that these are second time women founders who are able to get things that most women do not. Um, the statistic is about 2% of VC funding goes to women. It's much smaller when you look at women of color. So like they are truly one in a million, one in a like a very small percentage to get funding, let alone second time funding. Um, that's my generous reading of them.
That's very generous of you, I would say. Yeah, I think you're completely correct. I guess maybe I was betraying my own optimism that there might be some type of shift or change, but of course I agree with you that like inherent within venture capital and VC funding is this expectation of growth that demands a way of working and producing and selling that is just antithetical to so many of the values that I want to hold in my small business. And I don't know that there's a way out of that. And I always think of like Glossier as an example of this, right? A brand that has grown so much that from my perspective is like so successful, you know, achieved a certain like amount of market saturation, moved into so many different spaces, but is always in the news for being like not good enough, it feels like, through the years, like the ways that all of their things are reported as quote unquote failing. And I think, you know, in the past, we've talked about sort of the gendered nature of the girl boss. And I would agree with you. Like, I think the girl boss didn't really go away, just public perception around that really shifted. And we've talked about the ways that women are judged differently than men in these same positions. But at the end of the day, I'm just not here to back a VC funded company more broadly. I also noticed and was intrigued by Audrey Gelman's new endeavor business, which is a countryside inn, as she's called it, called Six Bells, that's opening in upstate New York. And she's trying to sort of build a hospitality brand now around this sort of like cottagecore return to the past aesthetic. And that is where my like alarm bells went up based on the first part of this conversation. I was like, wait, return to the land, yearn for the past is some of the language in this profile. And because of all the like conversation we've had here and the sort of like eye opening that you helped me do around these Sydney Sweeney ads, now like my red flags are going up when I see this sort of thing. What did you think about Six Bells or this reporting around like sort of Audrey Gelman's return to business?
Yeah, I had been eyeing this because I remember, and I think it was New York Times just freaking loves her because she also has a little boutique, I think in Brooklyn, also called Six Bells, that she opened probably a year or two after the whole wing stuff. And this hospitality brand is like an extension of that universe. Yeah, my hackles always go up when people are talking about, when white people specifically are talking about yearning for the past. It gives a little bit of like make America great again, and you're like, okay, what does great mean? Great for who? Great when? There's also this point in the article where the journalist asks, is there a cause related to this? And Audrey is really hesitant because the wing was feminism. This is about feminism. This is about women's empowerment. And she says something about how like anything that is going more analog is kind of a cause because things are getting so digital, so automated. And I was sitting with that because on one hand, I have made similar assessments. I actually was just writing a paper about this for school where I think when I think about where the world is going as a coach and a facilitator, people can use ChatGPT, AI as a coach, but those things cannot facilitate group in-person experiences. So when I think long-term in my career, I'm like, okay, if I want something with somewhat of a moat around it, things that are group and in-person are important. She gets there kind of where she's like, I want something analog. But to me, it seems like this very independent fantasy of like, I get to step into this storybook world. Truly, each room of the hotel has these little accompanying stories related to it. There isn't anything about people connecting in the space. Like she doesn't talk about this is a place where you can go in the woods and be with the people that you love and care about and unplug. It is like this escape from reality for people who yearn from the past in a way that seems very separate. And that's again where I'm just like, I don't know if I hear what you're saying and there are parts that I want to agree, but I can't give you the most benevolent reading because I have seen the way that you've operated in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this underlying question is also really interesting to me. Like, is being analog over automated like a cause of its own? And I think you're right to point to like it can be if it places us like if it connects us to others and like contextualizes us, like if it takes us into our reality, then that can be really powerful. But if what technology is doing is taking us out of our present moment, day, real life, quote unquote, and then if your like analog solution to that is also taking you out of your present moment, day to day life, quote unquote, real life, like it's interesting to think about those as like they're like parallel tracks, but I don't know how really different they are. And as I say that, I'm like, well, like I do love retreats and I do believe in the value of like stepping outside of your day to day life for certain things. And I also love hospitality culture and all of this, but it makes me want to think more as someone who just wrote a book about attention and social media and getting off of your phone. Like, what is the purpose of the analog? Because I still love technology and I still love being online. And like, nothing I've ever tried to argue is that we should like fully exit the internet. And so I don't know that I think analog is always inherently better than digital or virtual. What I'm more interested in is like the value systems that we embed our analog and our virtual lives with, right? So yeah, I'm definitely going to be reflecting on this.
And there wasn't a value system. I think that's what stood out to me is there's some people who love to dress in like period pieces, and oftentimes they will put in their bio some version of vintage clothes, not vintage values. So like, I'm not saying this for me personally, but I love the aesthetics of 1950s fashion. I'm going to dress in a lot of that all the time, but they really want to say, like, I don't hold those values. Audrey isn't willing to do that. Like she says, this is for people who want to be in the past, and we're not going to stand for anything except for this beautiful storybook getaway. When I was sitting with this as well, similar to what I was doing with the whole Sydney Sweeney jeans things, I'm like, okay, who's doing something similar? Who has done something similar but gone in a different direction? And Trinity Muzone came up for me. She is the co-founder along with her partner of Gold. I do think they got VC funding at some point for Gold. And her partner moved to upstate New York. They're raising two kids there. They have a garden. They do, like, one of her recent Instagram posts was about how it's really radical to buy in bulk and ways that that can help the environment. And so in some ways, she is talking about returning to the land from a more progressive point of view, and has like this upstate New York fantasy-ish life, even though I'm pretty sure she's talked about some of the racism she's experienced being there as well. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like I remember that from a few years ago. Recently, and we'll add this into the Substack, she was being interviewed and she talked about how, I'll just read this. My favorite things tend to be smaller operations that prioritize proprietorship. I want to meet the farmer, the maker, the owner. I think in today's world, this is my own emphasis, also in the VC world, we've really emphasized the value that a successful business means not having to be, quote, in there anymore. But the best places, the ones full of humanity and character and a certain funny particularity, remind me that, quote, in there is really the only place left to be. And I found myself digging for this quote because when I was thinking about, do I buy what Audrey is selling? In the article, they're talking about how this could be this whole Martha Stewart empire or this hospitality empire. It's immediately getting to scale. Like, it's not enough for her to have this cute little whimsical place in upstate New York. It has to be, how can I franchise this? How can I make this bigger? And I was just sitting with this question of like, does Audrey want to be a proprietress? Does she really want to be in a business that she's building? Or does she just want to spin up something and then, you can't see me if you're not watching the video, but I'm like spinning it up, putting my hands up, and then kind of like pushing it away, expelling herself out of it, distancing herself from it. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. Two people, upstate New York, going different routes, having different values of being in and around their businesses and the people that they serve.
Yeah, I really think you're pointing to something pretty profound here. Or like Trinity also in this piece is pointing to something profound, which is I feel like VC founders really like fetishize the exit, right? Like that's what you're always working toward. The ultimate goal for most of them is to exit their business, sell off their shares and make a ton of money. Like because often the money in your business, you don't actually see that capital until you leave, until you're out. And so I know plenty of founders who sold their businesses or like been acquired, really. It's not necessarily even that they sold it and like it lived on without them, is that it was acquired into a bigger brand, and that's where they saw the money. And I think not every founder is like that. We're seeing like when we see Ty Haney and Winnie Wolf Herd return, like those weren't businesses necessarily built to be acquired yet.
I disagree.
They will, yes, I would agree. They will eventually be acquired, but it's like that's where the money is seen. And you see this so much, even on like the solo founder level of like, what is the purpose of a startup? A lot of the books out there will say to you, it's like to make it big enough that it can get acquired and you can actually make your money. It's like to pour all of your cash and your time into it, and then the payout is the exit strategy. It's the acquisition. And I think that that's a very different set of values than choosing to be in there, to be in the business, to be the proprietor. I would also say another difference here, it goes back, I guess I just keep saying this over and over, but it's like that contextualization of the community piece, right? It's like, it seems like Six Bells is trying to be a sort of like escape that lets you go somewhere else. But where that is not contextualized in like, this is our community and this is who provides things. And it seems like what Trinity is trying to do is much more like this is the web of community that this business exists within, and let us really be embedded in that web. And I think that that matters a lot when I think of what I want for businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because this is a relatively recent, um, I don't know. I just feel like I'm sitting with this more and more as there's stuff going on in my personal life where I'm thinking how I relate to business outside of just the business that people see me run day to day. And like, yeah, what does it mean to be in there? To what extent do I want to be in the certain things that I do? For how long? There's so many questions here, but I mean, there's a reason why I know VC investors and have never really pursued. I've had chats with people, but never really pursued investments because I could never fully get behind the argument that they're making. I'm yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens though. I feel like with the let me just have like my cynic take for a second with Ty Haney.
Please.
I really feel like her play with outdoor voices is to give herself the ultimate case study for try your best, because try your best is originally I think it was with the blockchain. I don't know how much they're doing with that in crypto now, but it's essentially like enabling customer loyalty and community building and rewards. So I think if she plays her cards right, she takes this brand that she originally built, that customers are really disillusioned by because it's sold off. There's an article that's out there about how it's kind of a ghost brand now. Like it's lost a lot of its heart and soul and personality. If she can use Try Your Best, which they mention in the article, to facilitate this community now, then she can go and sell to all these other people and be like, look what I was able to do with this thing that was in the news for being in the gutter. Guess what I could do for you? And so I think that she's doing it to enable her exit for this other brand. That's my cynical take.
Yeah, I don't think that's that cynical. I think it's just you see the strategy. And, you know, these girl boss founders are smart people. They're also thinking strategically many steps ahead. And I think you're really seeing through that. So I would totally co-sign what you're seeing. Well, Taylor, how are we feeling after this romp through summer pleasure, jeans, eugenics, solo travel, Tracy Ellis Ross, the girl boss, Six Bells? We covered a lot today. Is there anything that's sort of standing out to you as a takeaway from this conversation, or like a point you'd want to return to and sit with?
The thing that's sitting for me is this conversation around values and like full self-expression. I think I know that we are in a time where we need to know what we stand for. I think that is only going to be increasingly true. And I also think life is just a lot more joyful when you're able to do that. I think it can sound like know your values, know what you stand for because you have to stand in opposition to things, but also like seeing Tracy being for joy, for full expression, for exploration and curiosity. I think we just have more light and hope, but also groundedness when we're able to do that. And that's actually work I've been doing with my therapist lately is less values. I have a pretty good sense of what my values are, but more like taste, personal taste outside of other people's saying this is cool or not cool. And the more I come into that, I'll probably mention it in our next thought of you, but we're doing an experiment where I do this practice in the morning to really like get me into my own taste and everything. And I've only been doing it for a few days and it's flipped the way my days feel. So, values, taste, having a personality and identity outside of what people tell you you should have.
Yeah, I was looking up like Tracy Ellis Ross style quotes before we did this, and one of the ones that's on the internet, like who knows if she actually said this or where she said this, but one that came up a lot was, "The more I am myself, the more my life looks like me," which I really appreciated. I think that it has this sort of like inside outness of construction and like reciprocalness of like construction of self is constructing the world around you and finding your reflection there and bringing yourself there. Also, what you shared about like your morning practice, I reminded me that I listened to a podcast episode a really long time ago with I think Pharrell Williams, I'm pretty sure, where he talked about how like for the first 3 hours of the day, like he didn't listen to anything because he didn't want other people's stuff in like his sort of like fresh mind. And I found that so interesting as someone who like immediately wakes up and like turns on music or a podcast or something else. Like I remember reflecting on how I didn't give myself any time with myself before I started the inputs of the day, which I thought was interesting. But I want to bookmark this because I've been seeing a lot of people online talk about taste as an antidote to a lot of the like issues with both like the extractive algorithmic curation of our world and generative AI and like fascist politics. And as someone who like wrote a dissertation on taste, I have a lot of thoughts. Like part of me is like hell yeah, and then part of me is like, but we have to be careful because the concept of taste has a storied history as well. So I want to circle back to that, and I can't wait for our next episode. Maybe we should just go record it now.
We can just have a marathon.
Yeah, just like 7 hours of recording or something. Well, I'm so happy to have had this time to reconnect, Taylor, and I'm so happy to share this Midsummer's thought of you with our loyal friends and fans. Folks, if you're tuned in, you can find us at thoughtofyou.substack.com. We would love to hear from you. We would love to know, like, are you watching Solo Traveling with Tracy Ellis Ross? Did you see the Sydney Sweeney ad? Did it raise red flags for you? Or did you learn all about the problematic rhetoric of it in this episode? Do you have thoughts on the girl boss? Is it back? Did it ever leave? It? Did they? Did she? I don't know. What are the girl boss's pronouns? I suppose she, her, hers is probably where we're at with that. Did she ever leave? What might happen upon her return? And anything else you want to share? You can find us on Substack. But until next month, we'll be thinking of you. Thanks for listening.